All right, welcome everybody. Hopefully, you can hear me. We are reviewing tonight's episode of Raw. This was the November 6th edition here, I believe, in the Mohegan Sun Arena in Pennsylvania, which kind of made me was wondering why they would just say Mohegan Sun instead of saying where they're actually at. But regardless, this was not a bad episode of Raw. Uh, it's been a while since, not that long, but it's been a couple weeks since I've been able to watch a show front to back without pretty much any interruptions, whether it was Monday Night Football getting in the way, work, or just any other possible things that just kind of interrupted my viewing of the show itself. But again, a pretty decently newsworthy episode of Raw, continuing off of the heels of Crown Jewel. Not too much of a surprise because we're only 3 weeks away from Survivor Series in Chicago. Fortunately, I will be at that event. It should be a good show, at least from the first couple matches that were announced tonight. And definitely looking forward to some of those matches already. And we already got our War Games match announced, the one that we were expecting to hear. And we got it right at the very end of the show. Very rapid fire segment to end the show, in which I thought we'd see a potential cash in, but this one makes more sense. And I'm excited for it, but we'll get to that in a moment. So let's just kick things off immediately. And this had Seth Rollins right at the beginning of the show coming out to pretty much pat himself on the back for beating Drew McIntyre, but he does give Drew props for his effort at the show. And specifically, he makes note that he didn't accept the Judgment Day's help, so he respected Drew for that. On top of that, he also wanted to give thanks to Sami Zayn, and he wanted to do this personally to him. So he invited Sami Zayn out to the ring with him. And a part of that was, if you missed Crown Jewel, was Sami saved Seth from being cashed in on by Damian Priest. So took the briefcase and ran off with it. And part of this segment involved you being clued into why Sami didn't have the briefcase with him. It's because Adam Pearce wanted it back, and Seth made note of this, and he was telling Sam, excuse me, you're probably wondering how I know this, and it's because I went to talk to Adam Pearce after you did, and it's to get you a championship opportunity. So he gave him let him call a shot, if you will. So he said, whenever you want it, you let me know, we'll make it happen. And Sammy, he hesitated at first, saying he wants Seth at 100%, and Seth had a really good line, something that I think has probably been undersold, and it was just a good thing to say. He said, no, I'm not at 100%, but neither are you. None of us are ever at 100%. And when you really think about what that really means, like, so the WWE sending these people out there hurt all the time, that's not cool. But you get the gist of what he's actually saying. And it was a great way to build up Seth as the fighting champion, and also build up Sami as someone that's not going to take the easy way out. He wants to make sure that Seth is at his absolute best when he takes him on. That being said, Seth saying this got Sami to say, you know what? How about tonight? There's no better time than right here in Mohegan Sun Arena. Let's do it tonight. Seth agreed, and we had our main event set later on in the show when it was announced by Pierce that he made it official. So we have our main event set for the show, an unannounced World Heavyweight Championship match against Monday Night Football. I think they would want to pump that up a little bit, but you know what? I'm all right with it. It's cool to have those kinds of moments because you don't want to always have everything super planned out. You want certain things to act as if it was happening organically. And I love that they did do this. So I'm okay with them hot shotting a World Heavyweight Championship match onto the show, specifically because it was there to set up the very end segment too. But after that, as we move on at the end of that segment, we get to the Judgment Day backstage doing their little clubhouse gig, and Damian Priest getting a little heated about the entire situation over the last couple of days, and they're going to take care of the New Day. So it was a tag team match, pretty quick match considering, again, you want to build up the Judgment Day as a tag team again to, give them a little bit of credibility instead of the quick runs they've had in the past. So a good win for them against the New Day. Right now, the New Day just is like one of those gatekeeping teams right now. They just want to use them as one of those teams that can be a feather in the cap, if you will, for any tag team out there. But when it comes to tag teams on Raw, Raw's looking pretty good, and I'm really hoping that they find a way to split these titles off at some point so we can have both shows have specific tag team divisions instead of the Judgment Day maybe showing up to SmackDown every once in a while and challenging a team there. But again, that's something that can happen here in the future. There's no reason why it can't happen yet. We've had it with the world titles for the men's and the women's, so hopefully the tag team titles aren't too far behind, and making those split off and have it each show have their own division, which is, I think, absolutely a possibility at this point. After that was Shinsuke versus Akira Tozawa. Shinsuke's been planting seeds. I won't say for who, because I don't. If this ends up happening, I don't know if Shinsuke be the first person that someone from Chicago would face. But Shinsuke's been inviting a challenge for someone. He's waiting to be met with a challenge. And Tozawa was the first one to answer that challenge. And it was a quick match. Tozawa is going to be on NXT tomorrow to take on Noam Dar for the Heritage Cup. So to have him get essentially squashed here by Shinsuke was an interesting choice. Granted, NXT as a presentation is on a lower level than the rest of the main roster, as much as WWE on TV won't say that, but that's the actual case. So a quick match here. Tozawa got a couple hope spots, but nothing more than you'd expect against Shinsuke. After that, they went over some of Natalia's career highlights, talking about Guinness World Records and talking about the Women's Battle Royal coming up. After that, we did get our setup for the fatal four-way for the number one contendership towards the Intercontinental Championship. One thing I do want to point out about the build-up to this match. So they had Adam Pearce going over all of the participants in this match, and this is one of my favorite things that WWE has done in quite some time. When you have a random match like this with 4 competitors, it's cool and a great idea to build them up and show the audience, maybe if they've missed a few weeks, or just explain to me, why does this person deserve a chance at the championship? This is something I think AEW can listen to, and WWE themselves can keep listening to this advice, because this was a great video package. So they went over every every competitor in this match and explained why each of them deserved a shot at it. And it was Adam Pearce saying it. And right now they are leaning so hard into Adam Pearce as a general manager. It's making sense. And this is the best presentation of any of the authority figures WWE's ever used in its history. I truly believe that. I think Aldis will get that opportunity to show that himself as well. But Adam Pearce, I think, is by far and away the best authority figure that WWE's ever used in a serious manner. And if you want to talk about Vince and everything he's done for WWE as an on-air character, you can, but I think that also was the authority figure at this point. I guess just looking back, the heel authority figure just kind of played out this point. There's a straight shooter, someone that's acting realistic, and I love it. So he goes over why The Miz deserves it. He went over why Bronson Reed deserves it. He went over why Ricochet deserves it, even going back as far as Ricochet was the person Gunther beat to start this reign, which was a great callback. And that's something you felt like you just never would have gotten before, is callbacks to well over a year ago. And you can even go back to Crown Jewel, and they talked about Bayley and Kairi Sane, why there's an issue there too, talking about how Bayley pretty much beat Kairi Sane out of WWE. So they're doing a lot of good callbacks, and this video package was an excellent way of introducing all these competitors. And then you had a pretty good 4-way match for the number one contendership. The only thing that was weird about it was the very end of it, where they appeared to try to do a double pin at the same time, but it showed Ivar, or he was pinning Ricochet kicking out, and Miz being able to pin Bronson Reed. So it was a weird finish. If you watch it, you'll understand what I'm talking about a little bit more. It was almost set up to be as if they're supposed to both get a successful pin just by the way the ref was counting. But in the end, Ricochet kicked out way ahead of the count, and Miz didn't have anyone kick out. So I don't know what was going on there. Pretty good match. There was an awesome spot with Ricochet getting bounced off the ropes and doing a Hurricane Rana at one point. Almost had a very scary landing there too. So thankfully he seemed to be okay. Outside of that, it'll be The Miz versus Gunther at Survivor Series. I'm not particularly excited about that match on paper, but who knows? Maybe they can. Gunther hasn't really failed yet when it came to having these barn burner matches. So I'm looking forward to what Gunther can do with Miz specifically in this instance. Being there live for it, I don't see the Miz going over well in Chicago, but we'll see how that ends up going over. So we got Gunther and Miz for the Intercontinental title at Survivor Series. And they also announced later that Ivar and Miz will go one-on-one because Ivar did start laying the boost to the Miz at the end of their match. So we'll see how that ends up going. If Ivar puts the Miz out of action, if Ivar gets added to the match, make it a triple threat, that would make it a little more interesting, I think. I want to see Ivar versus Gunther, but again, that'd be heel versus heel. So, and the Miz wasn't technically turned babyface, but they're positioning him as one, so it's kind of weird. I don't know. But after that, had a backstage segment with the Alpha Academy. And then moving on up to that, they went through a couple of video packages from Crown Jewel. And then they did a highlight of the Creed brothers and Ivy Nile signing the Raw contracts. So should have been a good hint of how the rest of the show would go for those three. The Creeds ended up beating DIY in a match. I just don't think it got enough time. It was about 10 minutes or so, but also had some interference from Ludwig Kaiser at the end to help the Creeds end up winning to continue the feud between Imperium and DIY. Again, there's a match I want to see a lot longer. As two teams, I think if they got the chance, they would have a tremendous tag team match. But the Creeds 2-0 since getting called up to the main roster. So hopefully bigger and better things coming for them. And again, them being on Raw, this is why I want to see those titles split at one point. Because I don't think the Creeds would be the undisputed champions, but they have a chance to be the Raw tag team champions or the World Tag Team Champions if they give them different names, which I hope they do, like they did with the women's titles, give them more of a unified name across all brands if it gets swapped for some reason at any point in the future. After that, we got a backstage segment with Becky Lynch and Nia Jax, a little bit of back and forth there. Nothing really too unexpected in what they said, but Nia really just kind of laid it up for Becky to just absolutely go nuts on her when Nia said that she's going to break her face again. And then Becky said, funny you mentioned that because since that happened, I main evented WrestleMania and you got fired. So good clap back from Becky. An expected one, but very good one. And unfortunately, it'll be the best that Becky has all night because we'll get to that in a moment because the Battle Royal was up next for the number one contendership of the Women's World Championship to who would face Rhea Ripley at the Survivor Series in Chicago. Before the match started, Xia Li came down and, well, beat the holy hell out of Becky, and that got them both out of the match because Becky was no longer cleared, and Xia Li got thrown out by Adam Pearce. So both of those look like they may be heading towards Survivor Series for a match, which could be fun, unless they do something different. Unless they try and sneak a War Games match in there with the women. I don't think you need to do that. I don't think there's anything organic that would happen out of that, at least with the Judgment Day and Team Cody, which we'll get to in a minute. That's been building all year. That makes sense. Put that in War Games. I wish they would have waited until today to announce the War Games stuff because I think on Saturdays when they first did the marketing for it on Crown Jewel, and it'd have been a better surprise. It'd have been like, oh, War Games at the end of Monday. That would have made tonight, I think, a little better with the announcement. But we already knew War Games was coming, and we also knew it was probably going to happen with those 8. But more on that later. So the Battle Royal, just your typical Battle Royal. I don't think it really got that great until the very end. And even then, they barely got any time to do anything with it. And Zoe Stark ended up knocking Shayna Baszler out to become the number one contender. So a very fresh matchup here at Survivor Series with Zoe and Rhea. They really weren't doing much with Zoe since Trish kind of left again. And this is a nice little shot in the arm for her. This just feels like another competitor for Rhea. This kind of like Roman. It feels like Rhea's just kind of waiting until WrestleMania to lose. I don't see Rhea losing outside of WrestleMania, at least not to Zoe just yet. So it could be a little while. Hopefully Zoe continues to improve on the main roster. It feels like she has that potential to be in a very big spot. So we'll see how their match with Rhea Ripley goes and go from there. And then after that was the main event with Seth versus Sami for the World Heavyweight Championship. And man, if you would have asked me 15 years ago if Tyler Black and El Generico would main event an episode of Raw for the World Championship, I'd believe you, because these two have always been good. I would have loved to have seen that 15 years ago on Raw, but alas, we're 15 years older, and so are Seth and Tyler, or excuse me, Seth and Sami. And they still had a good match. It was a very good Raw main event. No shenanigans at all. It was a very back and forth. It was a good few spots, including there was a moment when Seth was out of the ring and Sami was going to do like a plancha over onto Seth, but he saw Seth moving and just like did like this rebound off the rope and just bounced back on his feet in the middle of the ring. It was really cool. I think it was before the first commercial break. I don't remember exactly when it happened, but it's a fun little spot he did. Seth went for a lion tamer at the end of the match, and I love the lion tamer variation of the Boston Crab. So this was what Jericho would do before he started becoming more of the just straight up Boston Crab for the Walls of Jericho. Because it's not easy, because you're holding up someone's legs and you're putting your knee in their back, and it takes a lot of work. And I love that Sami did it. It was great psychology for the way that they're selling Seth's back at the moment. And he went for a Boston Crab eventually, and that got reversed into a flash pin, and Seth ended up beating Sami for the World Heavyweight Championship, at least to retain it. So 2 defenses in 3 days, another 20 plus minute match, another good 20 plus minute match from Seth after a long flight from Saudi Arabia, and Sami did the same thing. So kudos to the wrestlers that came back from overseas on in the last day and a half. So they probably just got home yesterday at some point, and to come back, go to Pennsylvania, have this kind of match, great job. And then we got 5 minutes left in the show, and that's when everybody started coming out. So the whole Judgment Day was out there, and at this point I was still leaning on there might be a cash in coming in, because it was just the 4 men out there of the Judgment Day. So you had JD McDonough, you had Damian Priest, Dominic Mysterio, and Finn Balor. So I was like, all right, Rhea's going to come out with the briefcase, and it's cash in time, because there's no one stopping him. And then you had Jay show up, and that's when it's like, oh, okay, we're heading to War Games style excitement here. So Jay came out, made the odds a little better, and then Cody evened it up, the odds at 4-4. And then eventually every producer, every security guard in the back came out, including Adam Pearce, and he was looking at everybody, said the word games like 17 times, and you knew where it was going. And he announced War Games at Survivor Series will be Judgment Day versus Seth, Sami, Cody, and who am I missing here? Jay Uso. So 4-on-4 War Games match. Jay and Sami on the same side for a second straight year. Should be a fun match, hopefully. I'm just trying to think ahead here, like who ends up winning this. And this, when it comes to dethroning Seth, I don't want to see Damian necessarily do it. But at the same time, I also don't want to see a Money in the Bank contract winner end up losing again. But something just doesn't. Damian Priest just doesn't feel like the person that's going to dethrone Seth. It just doesn't feel that way. I think every person that Seth's face at this point would have been a good person to defeat him. So Shinsuke, Finn, Drew, even Sami would have been a fun win here at the end. But one way I could see this going is War Games ends, and one way or another, you have Damian cash on the contract at the very end. That would be a very interesting way to end the show. I don't think it'll happen, but there's an interesting wrinkle in there, because you can do it. Because you got them both the same match. If, say, Damian pins him in War Games to win it for the Judgment Day, and then he immediately cashes in and tries to do the same thing. It's got the cage there. It'd be at least a unique cash in, because you have the War Games cage there. You'd have everyone presumably still around. So it would be a very interesting cash in at the very least. But that'll likely be your main event not this coming, but here in a couple weeks at Survivor Series in Chicago. So we also have a few matches announced for next week's Raw. And I got those listed up here. So we got the Judgment Day. They'll be defending the tag team titles against Cody and Jay. So they're getting the rematch. As I already mentioned, The Miz versus Ivar. Ivar's been fantastic. And one thing I want to say about Ivar is that moonsault is awesome. What isn't awesome is how it's not being protected. So what I would have liked to see, well, he couldn't have done it with the finish tonight because the whole point was whoever was kicking out. I don't know. There could have been a way that I don't know. I want to see that moonsault protected because it's such an impressive feat. And to think if you're getting moonsaulted on by like a 300 plus pound person, that's going to be the most devastating moonsault you can receive. So I don't want to see him pull that move out unless it's going to win the match. Tegan versus Piper. I could see Tegan winning, so that could set up a possible tag team championship match between Tegan and Natalia versus Piper and Chelsea. And then we'll have Shinsuke versus Otis because at the end of the Shinsuke Tozawa match, Otis pretty much stepped up to try and take on Shinsuke. Shinsuke laughed him off and walked away. So those are your 4 matches that will be on next week's Raw so far. That's all that's been announced. After that, we look a little further down the Survivor Series. I'm actually going to pull up the WWE website here, see if they got SmackDown, anything previewing here for this upcoming show. The only thing I could assume, I don't think Roman's advertised at all, but we'll probably see something with Solo and Jimmy to follow up on Solo's win of defeating John Cena in pretty decisive fashion. And I imagine we'll see Io and Kyrie and Bailey and that continue. So that's the only thing I can see moving forward. Unless Logan Paul shows up on SmackDown, which is also possible. But I feel like they'll announce that here in the next couple of days if Logan Paul will be on TV this week. So as far as I know, nothing's been officially announced for SmackDown. If I'm wrong, let me know in the chat here. Moving a little further down the line to Survivor Series, as we kind of mentioned, Rhea Ripley will be defending against Zoe Stark for the Women's World Championship, and then Gunther will be defending the Intercontinental Championship against The Miz. I don't see how either of those champions lose their titles at Survivor Series. Like I said, Rhea just seems like a WrestleMania loss, and even Gunther too. So, I mean, all right, so my fantasy booking is Will Ospreay shows up in WWE and takes the title from Seth, but let's take unrealistic expectations out of the whole situation here. Gunther, 500 plus days as Intercontinental Champion. I don't know who your best pick is to dethrone him. The Miz certainly isn't him. And I'll tell you what, I found on Twitter the pocket of Miz fans. They exist. If you follow me on Twitter, you know why I said that. But the Miz ain't going to be better not be. That would, I think, be Hunter's biggest booking blunder if the Miz was the one to dethrone Gunther. I'm still of the mind, I think Ilya coming up from NXT and dethrone Gunther would be a great move there, just continuing off of their UK NXT history. But I mentioned Seth and Will Ospreay for a reason, because Gunther's not a bad move. Like, if you want to make him a double champion, that would probably be kind of going down the Roman. You're almost repeating the whole Roman storyline doing that, but it's a good problem to have. I'm glad it's not my problem to have. How Hunter ends up booking himself out of this is going to be interesting. You got plenty of dominant champions in WWE right now. You got Rhea, you got Gunther, you got Roman, and Seth's slowly getting there. But the way they're building Seth's storyline is that it's kind of like the Orange Cassidy storyline, where he's just burning the candle at both ends, and it's eventually going to flame out at some point. And I think that's kind of where we're heading. I'm not sure who's going to flame or help him flame out, but Seth's had a good run since May, so he's had it for about half a year. But Rhea's been presented as dominant. Gunther is beyond dominant at this point, and then Roman also dominant, but unlike Gunther, doesn't have as many clean victories. Let's be real here. Not as many clean victories, and that'd be my biggest complaint about Roman overall is that the dude just needs a clean victory. Please, just any clean victory. But overall, a pretty decent Raw show. I thought it flew by. I looked down at my phone. It was 9 o'clock already. I'm like, oh my goodness, only an hour left. So it's a hard thing for Raw to pull it out sometimes because 3 hours can absolutely drag. But at the same time, I enjoyed myself. It was a pretty quick 3 hours, as I mentioned, and I believe, I mean, that build of Survivor Series is coming in hot and quick. So it's kind of go time for them, and they're going to act like it on TV, and that's awesome. So of course we got the War Games set up for Survivor Series, so should be a fun 4-on-4 match between those two teams. Not sure who wins. I think if you gave Judgment Day the win, it feels like the baby faces will still need to try and win unless there's some big angle at the end with those four. So I think the baby faces come out on top, continue dissension within the Judgment Day, or might even parlay with a cash in from Damian Priest. So a lot of good possible angles. So, and potentially maybe we have 5-on-5. I'm seeing that there's possible talk of that too. So we also know Orton is supposed to be coming back here in the next couple weeks. If knows he figures into that. Where's Drew McIntyre fit into Survivor Series? There's a lot of possible angles here. Of course, maybe you can get Kevin Owens involved. Who knows? So a lot of things could happen to War Games if it's going to be 5-on-5 or if it's just going to stay on 4-on-4. So we shall see here going on in the future. I'm not sure if they're going to do a women's War Games match. Like I said, I think they'd really, really have to start heating up something here. You could do something with Damage Control, but again, that would just kind of feel like we're doing a War Games match with them just for the sake of parody. I don't mean like a parody, like haha. I mean like parity. Just to have that equality, I guess, in that way. And I'm not against them having a War Games match at all. It just seems like, as I mentioned earlier, with the Judgment Day and Cody's team, they've been building that up all year. With the women's side, you really haven't had anything being built up. So it would take a lot of heating up real fast. They only have 2 weeks and a day to pull that off. So should be fun. When I say should be fun, I'm just really hoping it'll be fun because I'll be there. But again, pretty good Survivor Series. I enjoyed the show more than Crown Jewel. To be honest, Crown Jewel, it wasn't bad. It was just, it was just there. So, what did you guys think? Let me know in the chat, in the comments. Again, not a bad Raw. Looking forward to SmackDown later this week, and AEW got a pretty good lineup heading up into Wednesday as well. They just announced a few more matches, so stick here with me for a moment. We'll run down that card. Because Tony Khan did announce a couple more segments after he announced the whole card. So for the world title will be MJF versus Daniel Garcia. Should be an easy MJF win there eventually. Mark Briscoe versus Jay White. So Mark Briscoe back on Dynamite after quite a while away. He's been hurt, so good to see him back on AEW show. Samoa Joe versus Keith Lee for the ROH World TV title. Holy smokes, this is going to be a slapper. I'm very much looking forward to that match, as I kind of wish they saved that for a pay-per-view. That is just going to be two hosses. Two of the best big men wrestlers in wrestling today. So that is going to be awesome. Swerve versus Penta. Again, dude, that's going to be another fantastic match. Curious where Hangman's at. Hopefully Hangman gets the upper hand at some point when it comes to Swerve, because they've made Hangman not look good during that whole segment that whole angle. And then Red Velvet making her return against Julia Hart. So Julia's been on the up and up, so we'll probably see her with an easy win over Red Velvet. Should be a fun match. And then outside of that, we'll have a segment between Hikaru Shida and Tony Storm with Tony Schiavone heading into Full Gear. And then Sting and Darby Allin will be taking on the Outrunners. So this is a prelude to the trios match that will happen on Saturday with Sting, Darby, and Adam Copeland versus the Righteous and Lance Archer, which is 6 names I didn't think I would ever utter in the same sentence this year. Very interesting lineup for next Saturday's Collision as well. So Dynamite, like I said, should have a couple great matches. MJF and Daniel Garcia should be a fantastic match. Samoa Joe versus Keith Lee is going to be a great match. Briscoe versus Jay White. Give them time. It'll be a pretty good match too. Swerve and Penta, dude, that's a layup. That's going to be a tremendous match. And Red Velvet versus Julia Hart has a good opportunity to be a sleeper match as well in terms of match quality. So I can't recall a match between those two. If it happened, it was probably on Darker Elevation. But very much looking forward to them getting the spotlight here on the show. I would like to see, I missed Collision, so I can't say much in terms of if Statlander did too much outside of a backstage segment, but I feel like she's been kind of lost in the shuffle too. So hopefully she gets a little bit of action here in the next week or so. But that was Raw. That will be Dynamite on Wednesday. What'd you guys think of the show tonight? What do we think about War Games between Judgment Day and Team Cody? So I'm going to call it, I guess, for now until we got something better than Team Cody. That's how that's probably what they'll say the team's name is, Team Cody. But and then we also got Rhea versus Zoe, and then The Miz. Yes, The Miz versus Gunther. So Survivor Series starting to take shape. I imagine we'll get at least, I'm going to bet we get Logan Paul's match announced for Survivor Series. I don't know if they'll do the Women's Championship match announcement just yet, if they do one at all. Again, I don't know if they're going to try squeaking in a War Games for them or not, or just kind of keep them in a singles match role for now. So we shall see. Again, good Raw. And we will see what SmackDown has this week, as well as Dynamite. And NXT is tomorrow. So should be, see, Noam Dar versus Tozawa. Lyra Valkyria will make her return after a week off. And what else we got for NXT tomorrow? Von Wagner versus Braun Breaker. And then Fallon Henley will take on Tiffany Stratton in an Iron Survivor Iron Survivor qualifying match. So NXT is booked for tomorrow. And I am booked for the rest of the night. So leave your thoughts in the comment section below in the chat, and we'll get to them in due time. So again, thanks for your support. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to us so we can stay in touch in this world, this crazy world of professional wrestling. Again, it's Brian, Pardon the Wrestling. Thank you very much.